Have you ever thought about what makes a luxury in an era when people were barely making ends meet? Some foods were known as uncommon treats during the Great Depression, when jobs were hard to come by and dinner frequently meant surviving on the bare minimum. Today, we are discovering the unexpected and occasionally available foods that were regarded as luxury items in America during the Great Depression. A food's status as a luxury in the 1930s wasn't always determined by its price. It was about how comfortable it was, how rare it was, and how accessible it was. The Great Depression is known as the most severe economic downturn in the history of the world. It began in the United States after the stock market crash of October 1929 and lasted throughout the 1930s and nearly impacted all the countries around the world. What followed was a chain reaction. One after the other, things collapsed. The banks collapsed, businesses shuttered, and millions of Americans found themselves unemployed. By 1933, nearly 1 in 4 workers was out of a job. Families lost their savings, homes, and farms. Breadlines and soup kitchens became part of daily life. The emotional weight of the era was heavy. People not only lacked money, but also hope. It was the time of devastation, and people were desperate for any sort of help at that time. With little to fall back on, survival often came down to how much resources one has in the backup. Families planted backyard gardens, bartered for goods, and stretched meals to feed more people with what they have. Staples like beans, potatoes, flour, and lard formed the base of most meals. If you had access to something sweet, fresh, or rare that wasn't just food, it was a treat, and sometimes a memory you clung to. And here is the list of those foods which came as luxury for the people at that time. Foods considered luxurious. The real butter was a big deal at that time. Most people relied on margarine or even colored lard to mimic the real thing. Some came with yellow dye packets to stir in by hand. So when a family had fresh, churned butter on the table, it felt rich, smooth, and comforting to them, like a small slice of better days. This also gave them hope for these hard times to end soon and get back to normal lives. A farm journal from rural Nebraska mentions a mother hiding a small block of butter in the back of the icebox to use only on Christmas morning pancakes, which was a gesture of love wrapped in golden richness. The fresh meat. Fresh meat, especially cuts like steak or pork chops, was a dream for many families at that time. Most had to make do with scraps, bones for broth, or offal, which was cheaper. For those lucky enough to raise chickens or pigs, meat still was not wasted, it was rationed and stretched. Families would turn one roast into multiple meals: a Sunday dinner, a hash on Monday, and soup by Wednesday. Oral histories often mention the smell of meat cooking as a neighborhood event where children would run home when the smell of fried chicken filled the air, even if it was someone else's kitchen. Coffee was a morning ritual many clung to even during the hardest times. The grounds were reused, sometimes 3 or 4 times, and people mixed them with roasted chicory, cornmeal, or acorns. A full, fresh pot of coffee was a rare treat. One widow in Kansas wrote in a letter to her son that she saved her coffee ration for Sunday, calling it her weekly peace offering to the world. Coffee offered warmth and a moment of calm in an otherwise exhausting day. We can tell that it was surely the comfort drink they had at that time. Sugar was tightly rationed and highly prized. Instead of buying candy, many families made their own sweet treats with molasses or corn syrup. Children would savor even a single spoonful of sugar in tea. One mother from Indiana recalled boiling sugar with vinegar to make depression taffy for her children's birthdays. In a time of blandness and repetition, sugar brought a spark of happiness and celebration to the people. The canned fruits. It is very surprising to know that these people had the availability of canned fruits at the time of the Great Depression. Bright, syrupy, canned peaches or pears were like jewels in the pantry. Often bought with ration stamps, they were saved for holidays or special occasions. The syrup itself was considered a separate delicacy, poured over biscuits, or sipped slowly. A Depression-era diary from Missouri describes the arrival of a tin of pineapple as the most exciting day since Christmas. Even the can was repurposed afterward as a cup or flower pot. White bread soft, fluffy white bread was more costly than baking hearty whole-grain loaves at home. Commercially baked bread became symbolic of modern life and affluence during the Depression. For children, a slice of purchased white bread meant they were eating like the kids in the Sears catalog. One man remembered receiving a white bread sandwich with mayonnaise and tomato as his entire school lunch, and treating it as if it were a delicacy. Bread was considered to be one of the most luxurious food items of that time. Not many could have it. Eggs were versatile and nutritious, but for many city residents without access to chickens, they were a luxury. Families in rural areas who kept hens often used eggs for barter trading, a dozen for milk, fabric, or even coal. A letter from a young girl in Ohio recounts her excitement at being given a hard-boiled egg for Easter, decorated with beet juice, and shared with her two younger brothers, which she considered something so precious. Unfortunately, that was the reality of the people at the time. The basic food was even like something rare to have. Ice cream required ice, salt, cream, and sugar, all hard to come by. During summer fairs or church socials, homemade ice cream became a highlight. Families would take turns cranking old-fashioned ice cream machines. One elderly woman recalled her father splurging once a year for a small bucket of ice from the general store just to make vanilla ice cream on the 4th of July. That annual scoop, melting fast in the heat, became a cherished memory. The chocolate candy bars were still available, but often unaffordable. Homemade sweets became the norm at that time. People pulled molasses, peanut brittle, or vinegar fudge. Kids would save up pennies for weeks to buy a Tootsie Roll. Stories abound of children using candy wrappers as trading cards or keepsakes. One man remembered his father breaking a Hershey bar into 10 even squares, one for each child, and then not taking a piece for himself. The store-bought cake or pie. While baking from scratch was routine, a cake or pie from a bakery represented something special. It meant someone had extra money or wanted to show love in a big way. A Depression-era cookbook includes a story of a father walking 5 miles to buy a birthday pie for his wife because he knew they couldn't afford flour and sugar at home. The gesture made the pie taste even sweeter. Some foods you might think of as humble actually carried a touch of prestige in the 1930s. Jell-O. Seen as a mixture of modern domestic science, Jell-O was colorful, jiggly, and cheerful. It was promoted in women's magazines as a smart dessert. If you had refrigeration or access to an ice box, Jell-O was a mark of creative hospitality. Spam. Introduced in 1937, Spam was initially marketed as a convenient meat replacement for the busy modern homemaker. It was expensive at first and seen as a novelty before it became more widely consumed during World War II. Oysters in coastal towns. Surprisingly, in places like Maryland or coastal Louisiana, oysters were easy to harvest, but still seen as luxurious due to their association with restaurant dining. Kids collected them with their families, and local recipes turned them into festive dishes. It is amazing to consider how deeply food connects us to memory, survival, and love. During the Depression, luxury wasn't about truffles or caviar. It was a pat of butter, a spoonful of jam, or the smell of meat on the stove. These small comforts brought hope, joy, and dignity. These foods made the people realize the importance of these basic necessities without which survival is hard. Today, we might not think twice about canned peaches or white bread. But back then, they were shining lights in dark times, reminders that care could be expressed in a meal and that even in hardship, there was space for delight. If you enjoyed this trip back in time, don't forget to subscribe and tap that notification bell. Here on Hungry Lore, we bring the past to life one story, one recipe, and one memory at a time. Tell me in the comments, what food would you have missed most if you lived during the Great Depression? Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.